Well, good afternoon. It's 5 o'clock, so I'm going to start my session. Good afternoon or evening if you're joining me in Eastern Standard Time. This is MAD PD Live, the 5 o'clock session. I am Julie Mueller. I'm coming to you from Waterloo, Ontario, Canada, and Wilfrid Laurier University's Faculty of Education. First of all, a shout out to Peter Cameron and Derek Rodenizer for putting together this incredible lineup and the opportunity to speak to whoever's out there listening about our educational best practices. I was an elementary teacher for about 10 years before I went back to school and got my PhD in developmental psychology. I now teach pre-service teachers in the elementary panel, learning and child development, health and phys ed, and the integration of technology. My presentation today sort of combines my knowledge and my passion. I'm putting together my knowledge on assessment and instruction with my passion for active learning and moving. So in keeping with the grassroots approach to this professional development opportunity, I'm going to keep it fairly informal. I'm going to just storm through the first few minutes and set the stage for talking about using e-portfolios for health and phys ed assessment. So it really all started because I was in the gym and needed to assess, and you aren't sitting at a desk, you don't have your computer close by, and I wanted a way to collect artifacts of learning and at the same time provide a chance for students to gather resources to use later on. And welcome, Manaz is joining me here today as a live audience member. Manaz, I just got so welcome. I'm just going to mute your mic for now, and we'll talk through the session, and then we can. Yeah, if you could just mute your mic for now, Manaz. And thanks so much. And so we're talking about trying to find a way to assess health and phys ed, which is very active. This same kind of assessment process could be carried over to other disciplines as well. Anytime where you're on a field trip, if you are wanting students to be able to present their learning in something other than a written form. So the portfolio, it came across as a way to combine digital tools and authentic assessment. So I'm going to share my screen at some points and let you read pieces of what I'm talking about as well. If you want to follow me on Twitter, this is my handle at jmuellerprof. I will also post that at the end, but it is certainly a way that most of us have come together for MAD PD, and I'd love to keep talking to you about it later on. So assessment, one of our biggest and most important challenges as educators. Not that testing and evaluation are king, but examining learning informs our instruction, and we need to know if we're actually reaching our outcomes and where students are. I teach a health and phys ed class that is composed of 30 or more students. It's only 5 weeks long, 5 sessions of 3-hour classes. And I believe in learning by doing. So most of the time we are in the gym doing hands-on activities. So I needed to find a way to assess individual learning using authentic and active tasks. So our Bachelor of Ed program teaches technology integration by immersing digital tools across courses where applicable. So I saw this as a chance to capitalize on digital mobile technology by taking it into the gym. And I wanted our time there to be used for active learning on the spot and formative assessment, giving feedback right away. Certainly in the gym, students get immediate feedback. If they are trying to make a basket and it doesn't go in, they know they need to change something. So the kind of immediate feedback happens naturally in the gymnasium, but I wanted to be able to capture and do some reflection and assessment outside of there as well. So the idea of a portfolio really set us up to gather that information and collect the assessment. So I'm going to just share my screen right now again. And hopefully everybody can see that slide. So this was the instructions that I gave to my students. They were purposely vague and not detailed because I wanted them to use this as an opportunity to be creative and personalize what they're learning. And the main objectives of our class, or the 5 key questions or learning objectives, are the following. So really what I wanted them to get out of the 5 classes was just, why is health and physical education important? How will you effectively assess HPE? How will you effectively plan for it? How will you effectively instruct HPE? And how will you ensure that your health and phys ed is safe, inclusive, and developmentally appropriate for all learners? So the ePortfolio then could capture the artifacts that help them with that and demonstrate it. Okay. So during the course then, we took part in a variety of learning activities that addressed the answers to those 5 questions. I provided feedback, like I said, immediately in the gym, online in our learning management system, back in the classroom, and we used a multitude of artifacts. So I'm just going to go through some of the examples of what you could actually put into the ePortfolio. So the website itself was a portfolio, but the artifacts were the activities that we did to get there. The first one, we did a group inquiry into different important issues in health and physical education so they could understand why this is even important. So they did their research, and then they conducted elevator talks, or a very short talk. It was 2 minutes, so it was a very tall building, apparently. They had a little bit of time to convince government funders to support their issue. So, for example, one group talked about childhood obesity, another group talked about daily physical education, another group talked about recess and sedentary lifestyles. So they broke into groups, came up with a convincing argument, and then they recorded it using the iPad video camera. Some folks were not pleased about being on camera, so they just turned the video camera down, and you could use just a voice recorder as well. So any digital tool that records and captures their voice acted as almost like a podcast of their findings from their research. Another artifact we used was the Google spreadsheets. So our students go out into classrooms, so we wanted to talk about theory and practice and make that connection. So in class, we came up with the variables that are across the top of this Google spreadsheet that were components of health and phys ed. And then they went out into their classes and their schools and filled in one row to describe what was happening in the school that they were in. So it was able to collect authentic, valid data right there and then, and then they could share that in their website. We moved on to concept maps. So they very easily captured the curriculum and mapped it out using, this one is actually Coggle, but there are all kinds of concept map applications that they could use. We also then did a diagnostic assessment. So what did they actually remember about the curriculum, with just flashcards on the gym floor, and then took photos of them and included that. So I could see readily if they understood the different streams, we could move them around, and then the photo captured it to keep in their portfolio. We used the snipping tool. So the Microsoft snipping tool is easy, quick. It's one of my favorite digital tools, and you can use that to capture your whole screen or portions of your screen. So these graphics here are from the actual curriculum document from the Ministry of Education, and this student chose to capture these and include that into their portfolio as well. Google Form was also used to collect ideas around daily physical activities. So rather than having them each write them out, I just created a Google Form, the template, and they just clicked and filled in the blanks, and it collects it all in spreadsheet form. And they could suddenly have a database of ideas without cutting down a forest of trees and photocopying. Using a portfolio that is online also gave us the option of including video. So we used an app called Coach's Eye, and that it really is just, I mean, you could capture the video with your phone. Some of the students use their cell phones in the gym. You could use your iPad and capture a video of, we used it in our case to capture mock lessons where students put on lessons. And as I mentioned, I had 30 students. We didn't have time for everyone to do an entire lesson. So I broke them down into 3/3 of the gym, and they did their lesson with a small group and videotaped it. And then I could look back at it. Their peers gave them feedback, and they could include that on their portfolio. Coach's Eye we used for teaching fundamental movement skills. So we would capture someone throwing a ball, and then you can look back at it immediately. You can turn it, put it in slow motion. You can draw balance lines. So we use the technology again to do more effective assessment. And then, as I mentioned, in the gym, we used smartphones and iPads to capture pictures and videos of all of our in-class fun. It allowed the students to take things like the chart paper that we used in the gym and put it in a digital format by just taking pictures. And included also another artifact were links to the resources. So a 5-week class certainly doesn't give you everything you need to know about teaching health and phys ed. So including resources certainly was a big part of that course. So links, databases, opportunities to come back to when they are teaching. So once we had the artifacts, we needed to choose a platform. I chose Weebly because it's easy, it's free. Of course, there's paid versions you can add to, but I had used it before in my website that I can show you at the end of the session. And it was one option that then I could provide support. We created a tutorial, a common tool for support, but then I also allowed for any other choice. Some students used Wix. I had a couple students choose to do a blog type portfolio and use WordPress. So again, that left it open for those who had talents with other platforms or preferred other platforms. So I'm going to stop screen sharing for just a moment here and come back and talk a little bit about the challenges and the solutions. So it certainly, I mean, any venture into technology we know is not without its challenges. And in this case, there were challenges around the technology, but also around the approach to assessment. So the idea of summative assessment, a portfolio assessment, where the entire grade is based on that portfolio, was difficult for some students. They said, oh, that's so much pressure because really my grade is only based on one thing. And really what I think has to happen was just more discussion around the philosophy of what assessment is, and that summative assessment. I wanted to gather and measure, what do you know about teaching health and phys ed? And pulling all of those artifacts together allowed me to see that. There was formative feedback, and as I explained to students, if they gave a response to an article on the impact of aerobic activity on learning, and so they just wrote a response, submitted it, I gave them feedback about that, and then they could use that to add to their portfolio at the end of the course, so that I'm not measuring what they already knew when they came into the course, but what they learned throughout. So that was a problem for some students, and I think it's important, if you're using portfolio kind of assessment, that you take the time to explain the philosophy and the approach behind that assessment and what it means. I also had to make sure that I was giving that immediate feedback, and sometimes that was hard to keep up with. But adding in peer assessment and self-assessments were also a good way to deal with that. There were technology difficulties in that some folks, didn't have a phone with them. The iPad wouldn't be charged. The usual glitches and hiccups. But we kind of went with the, ask a friend. There were several students in the class who were quite skilled in technology and digital tools, so they were offered to help. And we always found a workaround, and that's what integrating technology is about, is finding a problem and looking for a solution. So you're learning your content, but you're also learning how to deal with those kinds of things. We just Googled it, provided a list of artifacts. I gave students ideas for what they might include in their portfolio. Another issue whenever you're using multimedia is the issue around consent for use of photos, videos, that kind of thing. We created a Dropbox for the photos and videos that we took in the class that had other people in them. And then everybody could go in, and if you were in a photo, you had the right to delete it. So it was one way to ensure that people weren't posting photos that other people did not want to be posted. And we made sure that we used the advanced search in Google so that you could filter according to permissions when they were using graphics and other video material. So, and probably the last thing was this idea of providing support for actually creating the website. So I say Weebly is easy to use, but it's also time consuming, and it takes a while for you to understand the framework, or how it's set up, the infrastructure. So what I did do was have our my teaching assistant work with me on creating an actual Weebly website as a tutorial for creating a Weebly website. I'll share my screen again here and let you have just a look at this. Okay, so what he did was just include the 5 pages. Generally, most of the students made 5 pages in the website, one for each of the questions. Some of them integrated it all, but he did the same thing here, created 5 different pages and added pictures, and then how you add those pictures, how to create a concept map. Some, oh, sorry, I was trying to get into the website there, but it doesn't look like it's going to load. So that was, and I'll give recognition to Yoad Avitzer, who was my teaching assistant. So this was his creation. And that was available for students. Not all students chose to use it. Some students just did sort of trial and error. Some, like I said, already had experience. Some Googled it. Some had friends. A lot of them would get together and sort of, instead of everybody solving the same problem, once you solved the problem, you shared that with the rest of the class. So I would suggest that you don't have to be an expert in website creation yourself, but it's good to have a variety of tools available to support students. This is an example of a complete and very well done website, but unfortunately, the link is not working. I'm going to try it just once here and see if it will load for us. And if not, I'll come back from that. But this student then had shared their portfolio and were quite open to me sharing it with you, but it's not going to work. So you can see that they've included a number of different sections on the website, and she actually, Terry Ann actually went ahead and added a blog and is doing some reflection around teaching with teaching health and phys ed, and indicated that she would be using this website as a resource for a long time. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. I would suggest that, people hesitate to incorporate technology in physical education, but I would say that it's the opportune place to do that in terms of the type of assessment that needs to be done. So being able to capture learning with the digital tools in a mobile situation is just fabulous. And I would say I'm going to continue to work through that and solve the problems as they come up. So now I would ask, I'd just introduce Manaz Ikram is one of our Master of Education students, and she has joined me here live. And Becky is a Wilfrid Laurier University student, and she has been just sitting and listening as well. So I don't know, Manaz, if you have any questions or anything you would like to add, or Becky, you can go ahead and unmute your mic and share with us.
Hello? So you were just saying that phys ed and the technology isn't something that you always hear going together. So were a lot of the students really hesitant and really surprised about using it then?
Yes, actually, that's a good question, Becky. There were some, there's a range in any construct that you're teaching about, but certainly technologies can be sort of a love-hate kind of relationship. And there were students who said, I conducted a survey when they were done, because it is a fairly new approach to teaching phys ed and for assessment. I wanted to know what students thought of it. And some students said, yeah, I learned a lot in the phys ed class, but I don't think that creating the portfolio added to that. But the majority, in fact, almost all students said that their learning in the class and their mark on the portfolio were well connected. So it did represent their learning. So I see that as it being an effective assessment. Sometimes I think I would suggest that I cut down some of the technology, that it can get very sort of fractured and there's too much going on if we're trying to do too much. If you're doing a Google Doc and then you're videotaping and then you're trying to share with other people. And so sometimes, yes, they didn't see the connection. And I think it is wise to, moderate everything in moderation.
Yeah, well, I could see a lot of people kind of have that idea about phys ed that it's just playing games, and I think adding maybe the structure of the technology is helped maybe think about the strategies behind teaching it. And
that's a very good point, just about teaching phys ed, that it's sort of like music, where people think if you can sing, you can sing. You can't teach somebody to sing. And if you're an athlete, you're an athlete. You can't teach somebody to run. But we certainly can. There are fundamental skills and there are strategies and knowledge that comes with it. And I think that, yes, adding the assessment and the technology that we use in other courses sort of sets it up as, yes, this is a curriculum area that we need to instruct. Great. Manaz?
Dr. Dury, I just wanted to know what are some additional the technology way for the phys ed education?
In terms of presenting in the portfolio, or different ways to make the portfolio?
Different ways. Yes.
Yes. Well, I think your mic was cutting out a little bit, Manaz. So if I didn't quite get your question, I'll reword it. I think that you are asking what other platforms you could use to create the portfolios.
No, my question is basically what are the additional advantages of using this portfolio education?
Yeah, the additional advantages. Certainly I think there are several in terms of it being authentic and providing an audience. It gave people a reason to really ensure that they had accurate information, that it was, credible, that it was legible, it was attractive. So putting together the, just like if you give people an audience, right, they're going to do a better job in most cases.
Yes.
So I think that that's one advantage. Being able to have all of their artifacts and be able to go back and look at it and actually then do some analysis of the whole class. So I could look at all of the videos of their mock lessons and to inform my teaching for the next year and say what was missing. That's very useful. And I think, it was the staying power of those websites. And then at the same time, a really important benefit was that they were able to learn the skill of creating a website. And some students have told me they've gone on and done that with their students. So they transfer that knowledge and they've created websites with their students.
Yes. So it is in its initial stages. I have heard that portfolios are made for like a month or a course for like the sustaining.
Right.
Can be taken for sustaining it for longer period of time so that it can be used for like.
And that's a good point. I wonder sometimes if I should rename this instead of calling it a portfolio, because it is a website, right? Which is a little different than the traditional portfolio of just putting together in a binder or something. Because if people are thinking that it is built to keep going, and if you don't use it after, then it seems like you've wasted your time or it wasn't the intent. This is more just keeping resources for students as well, but the portfolio piece of it is bringing together all of their understanding, and it adds another layer of their understanding. So each of the artifacts alone, right, would tell me something about each of those pieces, but what they choose to include and how they incorporate that, I think it takes it kind of another level as well.
Yes. Thank you, Dr.
Minaz, have you used portfolios at all?
I have heard about this. This is my very first time and knowing about the portfolio, and I still find it very useful. Especially like the bringing this aspect and then connecting this with the digital tools and.
Terrific. All right. Well, it's 5:28, and our session was to wind up at 5:30. So I think we've done a good job. Thank you, Becky and Manaz, for being with me in the session, and thank you to anyone who's listening. And I will just share one last slide. With you, and that's my contact information, and I'll leave it here. So if you want to talk further, I would be happy to do that, and good luck with any portfolio work that either of you deal with in the next little while. So thanks again.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.